Well, good afternoon, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to the latest in the Evenbreak Explores series. So we like to explore all sorts of different subjects that are pertinent to disability and employment. And today we're looking at neurodiversity, but we might have a discussion about whether neurodiversity is the right word to use or not later on, who knows. So you're very, very welcome. We have closed captions available, so you'll be able to see those if you need them. We tried to get a BSL interpreter for today, but unfortunately there wasn't one available. So if anybody needs that, what we can do is make sure that we provide a recording with BSL on it, but hopefully the closed captions will be helpful. So I'm joined today by the lovely Michael Vermeersch, who's been a long-standing friend of Evenbreak from Microsoft, and also by the equally lovely Aidan Healy from Lexxic. So before we actually start going into the conversation, I'm just going to ask Michael and Aidan to just introduce themselves. Michael, do you want to just say a few words?
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I think a long-term fan from of Evenbreak, and again, well done with your 10 years anniversary, wasn't that? So yeah, so still congratulations on that. Still fresh in memory. So my name is Michael Vermeersch. I'm from Microsoft. I'm there the accessibility product marketing manager. So focusing on our commitment on the disability divide. What I'm also in another role at Microsoft, I'm also the chair of the employee resource group for employees with disabilities at Microsoft UK. So that's me.
Thank you, Michael. Aidan?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Jane. My name is Aidan Healy. I'm the CEO of Lexxic. If you don't know Lexxic, we're an organization that specializes in neurodiversity in the workplace. So we work with FTSE 100 companies, public sector bodies on kind of all elements of their neurodiversity journey, whether that's adjustments or training or strategy. And while I am newer to the scene as Lexxic's CEO, I know we spent many years, Jane, bumping into each other at conferences and events and having stalls next to each other. So it's lovely to be back on Evenbreak Explores.
Lovely, thank you. And for everybody who is here on this call, it's not supposed to be a webinar or a workshop or anything particularly formal. We're literally exploring some of the issues around neurodiversity. So don't feel that you have to be formal and wait until the end if you've got any questions to ask. If you've got any comments or examples you want to share or any questions, just pop them in the chat or raise your hand or whatever you want to do. And we'll come to you as soon as we notice. So don't feel you've got to be formal. It is a conversation. That's the idea, that we can explore some of these issues. And I think just to kick off, we talk about neurodiversity, and it's come into the public consciousness much more, I think, recently. But I'm not sure that everybody knows exactly what it means. So let's go to you, Aidan. First of all, I mean, what do we mean when we say neurodiversity?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jane, and it's actually quite common for people, pre-pandemic to come up to our stands at conferences and say, oh, I'm neurodiverse, and I didn't know I was neurodiverse until you told me about neurodiversity. So look, neurodiversity for me means neurological diversity. It means that we have different types of brains, different types of ways of thinking. And neurodiversity is often used as a kind of umbrella term for multiple differences, such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, autism, ADHD, and sometimes others. And I think for me, the reason we use the word neurodiversity is if I said to you a word like dyslexia or ADHD, how did you first hear about those words and labels? How did you grow up hearing about them? How were they represented in your school, in your university, in your workplace? Most of you have probably grown up hearing those words and thinking a negative thing, or thinking a deficit, or thinking a disorder. And I think neurodiversity is challenging us to look at neurological differences the same way we look at differences in gender, in race, in sexuality, in religion, which really is about differences. And if we moved away from focusing on people with neurodifferences and what their challenges are and what they can't do or what they find challenging, and take the more balanced view, we'd be much more inclusive in organizations, but we'd also get much better business results. So for me, neurodiversity is a new lens at looking at neurological differences.
So what we're saying is that we're all different, and that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. What's your take on it, Michael?
I think I only heard about the term after a late diagnosis of autism for myself, and that was very late. And okay, it didn't make any particular difference to me. And then I felt it kind of a little bit confusing in the sense that it had the word diversity in it, and also having done, apart from other studies, biology, I kind of so like, well, biodiversity, but that means everything. So on that sense, I kind of felt like the terminology didn't have any particular meaning to me unless ultimately we start ignoring valuing the whole diversity. And I learned that in biology, if you got the ecosystem out of balance, then you're in trouble. Even if you remove a minority, it will have an effect on the majority. And we're seeing that in the world continuously. And I don't want to dwell too much on what's on the news and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, well, because of this, we're having this. And I think in the same way that if we want to stick to the term neurodiversity, if we start to exclude neurominorities, if we start to exclude people who think just a bit different than other people think, we will be excluding ourselves of benefits. We will be excluding ourselves of insights and all of that kind of stuff. And I think then I'm going towards where Aidan is going. But on that sense, I sometimes feel that by just using the terminology and saying I'm neurodiverse, the challenge is, well, what did you just say? And I'm a little bit worried about using the terminology without any particular explanation. I think we need to value everybody, and we need to make sure that we create ecosystem where everybody can be their true best selves and then genuinely can shine, if that makes sense. So yeah. Day one.
Yeah, so what you're saying really is that the planet needs biodiversity to survive, and actually organizations need neurodiversity to flourish.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing, isn't it, really? And
if I could just add to that, Jane, yeah. I think so often, when you're in the majority, the system is designed for you, the processes are designed for you. You don't really see what the problem is. Do you know what I mean? Like, I say this as a white male, a lot of the world has been designed for me by people like me. So when often we hear about minority differences, I think there's often a misunderstanding of how the system, particularly the workforce system that we have today, whether it's recruitment, whether onboarding, performance management, can actually be excluding a very significant portion of the workforce, and a portion of the workforce that can add so much to performance and creativity and innovation. And I think that's what makes us excited and what makes us passionate, which is actually, what would a working world look like if it was more inclusive for all?
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, things like recruitment processes were designed by neurotypical or neuromajority people for people like us, and we didn't do it deliberately to exclude other people. We just didn't realize that what we were doing would exclude other people. So on that theme of diversity being a good thing, what is it that any employers listening now should be thinking about the benefits of? What are the benefits of having neurodiverse people within your within your workforce at all levels within the organization, what are the benefits that we gain as employer? As an employer myself, I know that because we employ a number of neurodiverse people, and sometimes I just sit back and let the magic happen, and people come up with ideas I would not have thought of in a million years because my brain just doesn't work that way. What do you think? I mean, Microsoft, for example, Michael, you obviously employ a lot of neurodiverse people, some of whom may not have been diagnosed. I mean, Aidan, you were talking about, what were our views at school? I'm ancient. And when I was at school, the terms neurodiversity, autistic, ADHD didn't exist in our lexicon at all. And so autistic children would be seen as aloof or a bit odd. People with dyslexia, children with dyslexia were seen as not very intelligent. I mean, we're way ahead of that now, but there still was that sort of deficit thing then, even before we had a label for it. But now that we understand it much more, what are the benefits to, say, Microsoft of having loads of people who are neurodiverse within the organization, diagnosed or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, personally, from a Microsoft perspective, what we're seeing is that by bringing in, doing our inclusive hiring programs, bringing those different perspectives, we get richer insights, we get better products, we get new products which weren't there before, where that was suddenly addressing new markets, but not necessarily markets who are speaking to the people we now represent, but also to wider markets where people say, hey, I kind of like this as well. I mean, only this morning I was talking about Office Lens, which is freely available in iPhone or Android, where you take a piece of text, paper text, you take a picture, it gets transformed in OCR and then get read aloud back to you, or also gives you immediate access to something called Immersive Reader and shows you it in a different format. Now, some of those technologies I just mentioned were invented or brought forward via people who joined in our inclusive hiring program, who kind of said, like, why not do this? And if I show this app to other people, they go like, oh, I wish I had this to do this particular thing. The example I discussed this morning was raising the guide dog. I had an accident with my finger and I had to spend an A&E. I wasn't bitten. I just kind of completely bent it in the wrong way. Just making a point clear. So I was in A&E over Christmas, and the nurse was saying, let me get you the instructions of what you needed to do. And she went away, and it took a while. And then she came back apologetically. It was said the working printer was 2 buildings away. And this is why, shall I show you Office Lens? And I took the picture and completely did that process with her, up to the point that I said, and what if I was blind? She said, oh yeah, we didn't have anything in Braille. And here I said, well, this technology actually let it read aloud to me. So I think what we're seeing is by having those neuro minorities, neuro unique talent, and we produce better and more products and more inclusive products. And there's research on this as well. There was an Accenture research in 2018 which has shown that organizations which embrace this, they have 28% higher revenue, double net income, 30% higher economic profit margins. And that almost creates that kind of culture in itself, which is attractive to millennials as well. So not just neuro minorities, not just disabled people. It just creates a new kind of culture where everybody just feels like, hey, I can thrive better there. So, you'd be excluding yourself of not only neurodiverse talent, but also new talent, but also it's that representation, that connection with the market, those new insights and things like that. So where do I stop? Sorry.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean, I think, as you say, with technology or with recruitment process, whatever it is that we change to make it more accessible for disabled people, it ends up being better for everybody. So it's not about, you know, these people's rights are now going to supersede those people's rights. It actually just makes it a better environment for everybody. Why would we not want that? Aidan, what do you think? What do you think that employers would gain by having more neurodiverse people with them?
Sure. I mean, I think I would say a few things to employers, which is number one, while the estimates of prevalence vary of people with neurodifferences, the figures that are often thrown around is between 15 and 20% of the population. So what I would say to any employer is this is 15% to 20% of your existing employees, your future talent, your supply chain, your customers. All of these things are connected directly to your business. And I think there's a few reasons to look at that. Number one is, you know, what we often call the moral argument. It's the right thing to do. If you want to be a progressive, caring, forward-thinking brand in 2021, you cannot bury your head in the sand and ignore 15 to 20% of the population, or say, oh, well, D&I isn't for us because we work in a unique sector. I think the other strong thing to remember is under the Equality Act, many neurodifferences have recognition under the Equality Act. So there is a duty of care to provide reasonable adjustments. And when we don't provide those reasonable adjustments, we actually expose ourselves legally, we expose ourselves as employers, and that is a risk and a much greater cost than the cost of implementing those adjustments. But I think, you know, what excites me, and I think Michael very much touched on that, is the talent we're not tapping into. You know, there is underemployment in many people with neurodifferences who want to show up to work. And I think sometimes in workforces, and when we talk about strengths and challenges, kind of context is everything, right? So to take ADHD, you might say, well, this person is very impulsive. But a strength of being impulsive is actually you can make decisions faster and more quickly. You might say, oh, this person is very high energy, but that high energy can actually lead them to getting work done quicker than other colleagues. Or you can say, well, this person is distracted. They can't sit still for a very long period of time. That can lead to greater creativity. It can lead to entrepreneurship. Most entrepreneurs are incredibly impatient people who want to just get on with it and change the world. So I really think context is everything, but the context we look at neurological differences is what you cannot do. And we make the what you cannot do often through our school system or through our education system, which rewards a certain type of thinking. So for me, I like Michael, I could go on a very long tangent about this, but I think I would summarize. For me, I would say to employers, this is about talent. This is about 15 to 20% of the population who are your workers, your future talent, and your customers. And if you're ignoring them, that is a business risk, and that's also an opportunity you're missing out on.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many reasons, isn't there? It's, yes, avoiding legislation, litigation, but actually, and it's the right thing to do, but actually, even if you're a very capitalist, money-grabbing corporate, you still need this talent. You know, that there are arguments for all, and I think you're right, Aidan. It is about context, isn't it? Because I think if people are allowed to be themselves and flourish, then we get the benefits. So if someone is, you know, and we do know that everybody is absolutely different. So 10 people with the identical diagnosis will be completely different from each other because they'll have different personalities, different support mechanisms, different ways of coping, different masking techniques. Men and women tend to experience things more differently. And I think the danger sometimes is that when we talk about the benefits of having neurodiverse people within an organization, there's a kind of assumption that all, for example, autistic people are good at maths, or all are good at coding, or all are good at tech, or all are bad at team working or interpersonal skills. And sure, that's absolute rubbish. It will be true for some, but like everybody else in the population, it will be true for some, but not for for everybody else. And I think, when we look at for me, the benefit is, speaking as someone who only employs disabled people, the benefit is having people in the team who think differently, whatever that might look like, means that we get challenged. So that if I come up with we ought to do this from my neurotypical, conditioning, I need someone to say, actually, Jane, that might work for you, but it wouldn't work for me because of this. And we need to be challenged. And if you have an organization that's never challenged by people who think differently, there's no innovation, there's no excitement, there's no new ideas. People feel frustrated because their voice isn't heard, and they either leave or they stay and they're disgruntled. Actually, it's not just having neurodiverse people within the organization, it's making sure that they can thrive within that organization, and and all of that. I've just noticed we have a question. Let's just
while you're bringing up the question, Jane, I think, Michael, you said something really interesting, which is your diagnosis of autism came later in life. So you were in the workforce, you were a part of a job, and if someone had said, "Oh, Michael, are you neurodiverse?" you probably would have said no, or you may not have identified with that. And I think sometimes when we're talking about people with neurodifferences, we're talking about challenges, we're talking about different ways of doing things. And I think if you think about the pandemic and before the pandemic, we talked about diverse workforces, but the reality is most of our offices were designed open plan for extroverts who didn't have a lot of sensitivity or who were able to thrive in that kind of environment. And some people do. Some people love open plan offices and love that energy. We made working from home this stigmatized change. If somebody worked from home full time, we'd be like, "Oh my God, like what's wrong with you? Are you okay?" kind of stuff, So I just think when we talk about neurodifferences, we're talking about different ways of doing things, of working, of challenging things. And, as Michael said, I think Microsoft have some fantastic examples of that. You don't have to have dyslexia to benefit from spell checker in Microsoft Word, or benefit from Cortana, or benefit from text to speech and speech to text. And it's what I would say to employers is, don't try and find the dyslexic people and go, how do we give the dyslexic people what they need? Think about the challenges here, which is actually, we say we're an organization of the future, but maybe there's only one way to fit in around here. And where is that limiting us? And that's just, as you said, Jane, that's not just people with neurodifferences. If you are female, if you are a person of color, then you know exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's about trying to fit in with the norm, isn't it? And that's exhausting. If you don't, happen to conform to whatever the norm seems to be, masking who you are, trying to pretend to be somebody you're not, is absolutely exhausting and a complete and utter waste of energy.
But I just want to, because just on another thing I want to highlight there, because we say, well, there you are, you got this and you don't do this. So I'm dyspraxic as well. Now, that has been shown throughout my young life, continuously failing in swimming and gymnastics and all of that kind of stuff. If you would say, hey, here's 50K, if you could touch your nose, I wouldn't bet on it. I think I've got a 50-50 chance that I can touch my nose, and otherwise I might just miss my nose. Now you then say, okay, that's your dyspraxia. But at the same time, I got gold medals in ballroom dancing. Yes, that took my teacher longer. That took me longer to learn. But I got the gold medals. Not many people do have the gold medals. So again, you might say, hey, therefore you're disabled, so therefore you can't do this. Actually, you know what? My dedication, my resilience, my stubbornness, whatever you want to call it, got me through there, and it got me higher achievements than typically people have in this space. For example, open plan office, I drink water because I know chances are very high that I will spill the coffee. So okay, wow, but drinking water is good practice. So I just want to, with all those mindsets and myths and assumptions that we have, it's sometimes we need to break those as well.
Absolutely. And Rashmi has said in the chat, I'd like to know how neurodiversity and cognitive ability are related. Are they both the same or imply different spectrum? And that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a kind of view that everybody who's autistic will be absolutely genius in a particular area, or that people who are autistic are all also have learning disabilities. And neither of those, of course, are true, because everybody's different. I don't know what the research is on the correlation between neurodiversity and cognitive ability, but I suspect there's very little correlation. Does anybody know different?
I can say a little bit about this, Jane. I mean, I think what's always important is, neurodiverse is a label, the same way, male is a label, white is a label, I'm Irish is a label. And labels can help us tell something about the characteristics of a group of people, but they don't tell us the uniqueness of the individuals. And so I think it's always important to be led by the individual, because as you've touched on, all autistic people are geniuses, or, oh, you're a woman, Jane, so you must love working in HR and you must love working with people because that's what women love. And you go, okay, that's not really being inclusive. What I would say, it's very important to say, having a neurodifference doesn't make you less intelligent or less capable. And it is interesting, Jane, as you said, we kind of have this trend in the neurodiversity community towards autism at the moment and autistic genius coders. Nobody seems to think you're a genius if you have ADHD or maybe dyspraxia, Michael, unfortunately. But if you have autism, there's a feeling of, oh, I saw Rain Man, and, that must be you. But what I would say is, neurodifferences mean certain things that come more naturally for others may be more challenging for someone with a neurodifference. But because of that difference, some things may be a lot easier that are more challenging for others. So I know some people who are autistic or on the autism spectrum, things that others find challenging, they find incredibly easy. They just go, this is the easiest thing in the world for me. Well, I don't get why this is a struggle. And other things vice versa. And that's the same in personality. That's the same. We all have things in our life that come naturally to us and that are more challenging for us. So I think when we talk about being inclusive, we go, okay, that person finds that particular thing more challenging. How do we make sure they're involved? In the same way we might say, if I had 10 extroverts in a meeting and 10 introverts in a meeting, I have to try and make sure as a CEO, my 10 extroverts aren't completely dominating the meeting and talking, because they'll love to do that. And people who are introverted or might need more time to come out can ask questions. That doesn't mean an introvert doesn't love going to parties or can't do public speaking or can't do all of these things. It may not just come as naturally to them. So your role as an organization is say, how do we help you with things that you may not find as easy as others to ensure you feel included?
As Aurora says in the chat, it's about intersectionality, isn't it? Because we're not just autistic or dyspraxic or whatever the label might be. We're also male or female or another gender. We may be parents, we may be consumers and voters. There's a whole range of things that make us unique and different from everybody else. And that's the same for any group of people that we might talk about. Interesting question here from Geethanjali, who says, I have a question regarding the demand-supply mismatch for neurodiverse people by corporate programs, including Microsoft. The last few months, I've spent time exploring the neurodiverse ecosystem, particularly in India. And I've come across some incredible neurodiverse people who want jobs and are qualified. On the other hand, there are all these companies who say they want to hire, but aren't doing anything actionable to reach and include this population. Why is that? And what are your thoughts? Well, Microsoft was mentioned there. Can we come to you, Michael?
I think, I think this is a journey where we're still learning ourselves. and we're building on what we're learning. And a key there is that as and when you do this on a global level, you have that intersectionality also to consider, as you mentioned there, different cultures, different markets, all of that kind of stuff, what appeals, what doesn't appeal to certain markets and things like that. So I think that in itself is something that you need to go through. And again, you can't just say this is how we will do it everywhere, because it needs to be adjusted to the markets, to the cultures in different areas. What we're seeing from a Microsoft perspective is that there is a level of quality that we want to go beyond, in the sense that this is the bar in the country. We want to have the highest bar everywhere. But, what does that mean? We're 200,000 people company. There's training to be done. There is having the same quality of recruitment to be done everywhere. And we are getting there. I don't know if you notice on our career websites, we have proactive adjustments that we're offering. But then again, if you compare, for example, the UK with other countries, in the UK, we got the Disability Confidence Scheme, which we are proud displaying that we are a leader there, but we don't necessarily have that yet in the other countries. And again, that's then where sometimes we are pushing the boundaries, but the same country, the country is not necessarily at the same level. Give you a really concrete example. We had some people from Germany over in our offices when we were allowed to be in our offices, and I thought they were, they got some great legislation for disability inclusion in Germany, and they were looking at some of the adjustments we had and some of the means we had to accommodate people with disabilities better. And they, you got this. I'm like, yeah, of course. Oh, we don't have that. So, and again, like, hang on, but I thought you were actually more promoting inclusion of people with disabilities. So there are still differences, and I think there's definitely still work to be done. But that's why also we have those mechanisms where, for example, the Enterprise Disability Answer Desk, which is available for everybody, a free service which addresses people with disabilities globally if they're having issues with our technologies. So again, we are pushing those boundaries, but it's not a surprise that we're far from perfect and that we're still on a journey. I think
we're all still on a journey, aren't we? And I think that relates very much, that kind of difference in different regions and different contexts leads us into looking at recruitment processes. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that this is something I feel quite passionately about. And traditionally, recruitment processes rely on CVs for shortlisting and then interviews for making the final decision. I'm particularly anti both of those as ways of assessing future performance for any candidate. But I think if you're neurodiverse, it can be doubly so. So what do you think? I know that everybody is different, as we've just said, but typically, what are some of the barriers, do you think, that neurodiverse people find when they're looking for work, when they're actually applying for jobs? What are the barriers that they face that maybe others might not face? Aidan.
Sure. Sorry, Jane, I wasn't sure if that was for me or Michael. So look, I mean, God, the barriers. Like you, Jane, I have very strong views on the CV interview process. But let's talk about the barriers I think that everyone faces to start with, which is, generic job descriptions that resemble wish lists, right? We want you to have great people skills, great attention to detail, great reading and writing. Sometimes it almost feels like a contradiction, right? We want you to be highly creative and innovative and dynamic and driven, but also really focused and detail orientated and be able to sit still for hours on end, and you go, who are these people? So, but look, so I think, for me, I think some of the barriers are, firstly, include qualities that are actually essential for the job. So excellent communication skills, good team player. When we're talking about this, say with candidates on the autism spectrum, those candidates may not identify themselves as having an excellent communication skills or being good team players, or, high attention to detail, must have this, must have that. But beyond that, I think there are a few things you can do, which is, on your website, on your job descriptions, be sure to talk about the way you're making your hiring process and culture more inclusive. State that you actually welcome neurodiverse individuals to apply to your organization. Explain that you want everyone to have the same equity of access or fairness in the process, and that, disclosure is a means to support them, although it's not required. And maybe, that we welcome the opportunity for you to highlight any support or any accommodations you need throughout the process to help you be, your best, and so on. So I think so often for candidates, you go on an employer's website and you just don't know, right? And you have grown up in a world where your difference has been stigmatized, where you've been made to feel small, where you've been told to mask, and to kind of step forward and suddenly say at interview, when you're up against so many other potential candidates, by the way, I'm different, I'd like these accommodations, is a very brave and can feel very risky step. And so I think it's your duty as an employer to make that process easier and also make it more psychologically safe. Again, sorry, this is a 30-minute rant, Jane. So I'll stop there.
But you're so right, and this is the same for everybody, isn't it? I mean, I really don't think that interviews are a good predictor of future performance. What they test is somebody's ability to blag at interview, not their ability to be good at the job that you're interviewing them for. And so many of our candidates say, I can prove to you I'm really good at X, Y, or Z. I'm just not very good at bragging about it in an interview. So why don't we as employers give people the opportunity to demonstrate their skills, to show their skills in a real environment that they would be doing in the workplace, rather than come and sit in front of a whole load of strangers and tell us how brilliant you are, which,
yeah. And I mean,
the best blagger, not the best person.
Absolutely. And I think of certain things like, a role in Microsoft, or, if I was hiring a programmer role, an IT role, I would probably give them a really crappy, messy Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that I put together. And I said, right, make that better and figure it out. That's your job. That's the job interview, right? It's not tell me your background and tell me, it's like, there's the messy spreadsheet. How quickly can you fix it? And because that's the actual job. That's the actual job I'm hiring for in that moment,
people
right?
Ask such silly questions at interview, like, why do you want this job? Well, because I need to pay my bills and you've got a vacancy. Yeah. That's why I want this job. And people don't always understand.
I've wanted this job since I was 1 year old, and it's been my dream. And I'll bet it has. I'll bet it has.
Michael, what do you feel about the recruitment process and how it could be improved?
So, I mean, I could go, and I'm going to mention now anyway, but I could go to the point that, the disability employment gap is there. It's worse for minorities, that disability employment gap. And there's not a single employer out there which says, we don't want you. They all say, yeah, we're an equal opportunity company, right? And so how do you know, right? And that's then where, to Aidan, you need to be, I think, I really encourage employers to be explicit about this. And there's a variety of ways you can be explicit about mentioning, for example, that you're disability confident, but also celebrating diversity, celebrating disability inclusion, and signposting that and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that is then where you kind of say, oh, okay, there might be something there for me. So absolutely that. But just going further on what you said about the interview process, whilst for the inclusive hiring process, we got a great process where we're looking more on how people work towards an outcome, right? Here's a problem. How would you solve that? Why did you solve it like this? And let you get on with the job and like, okay. And then you see the capacity and the capability and the potential of the people rather than, whether you want to see yourself in 5 years and take that as a qualifying answer, or what have you done in the past and all of that kind of stuff. Where typically you will see that when you're minorities and other communities as well, that they undersell themselves, they undervalue themselves. But what I'm seeing now outside our inclusive hiring process, which I really love, is that we start putting allies and advocates into the recruitment process. So, and those allies and advocates will say, yeah, that was nerves. That was nerves. That was the candidate's nerves. But if you look beyond that, what did we see? Yeah. So genuinely almost having an ally or an advocate in the room. And we would also have a diverse committee actually discussing the candidate. And then somebody, and the advocate and the ally would just making sure that even there, we considered everything from a diversity perspective. And I think that's also a new way to go. So we can take all these things away and just focus on what are we really looking for. Yeah, so I think that's, and we need to get a bit more creative. I remember a couple of years back, they would say like, why don't we share the questions? Oh, but then they know. Hang on, are we testing the candidate for how well they handle surprises? Or are we testing on how they solve problems?
Absolutely. And I think, Lindsay made a really good point in the chat saying that, actually interviews are often about whether the person has the right personality that they're looking for, regardless of their skills. And I think, we talk a lot about unconscious bias and, we know unconscious bias exists. I'd rather look at conscious inclusion so that we don't give ourselves the opportunity for that unconscious bias to rear its head. So as you say, Michael, somebody in an interview, neurodiverse or otherwise, but could be neurodiverse, may not make eye contact with the interviewers, maybe fidgeting, maybe looking at the floor, maybe looking very anxious. And subconsciously, that gives you a kind of, they're a bit, what's the matter with them? Whereas somebody who's smiling at you and looking in your eyes and, will come over as being much more friendly, unappealing, none of which has got anything whatsoever to do with their ability to do the job. So if we say, well, actually, let's not interview them, let's do what Aidan just said and give them a test on something that have to do in the workplace, then personality, culture fit, whatever that means, doesn't come into it. When employers talk about we want a good culture fit, what they mean is, we all go to the pub on a Friday and we want them to come with us and have a good laugh. What happens if it's a Muslim that's going for the job who doesn't drink, or someone who's gay, whose partner doesn't particularly like going to some pub, whatever it might be? It shouldn't be about culture fit. It should be about, do they have the capability to do the job that we want them to do? So I think, all of that's really important as well, isn't it?
And Jane, I think if I can jump in here as well, there's a real sense sometimes with interviews of almost we need to keep this element of surprise, so like a lot of our recommendations with employers are saying like, okay, well, can you give candidates guidelines on what to wear? Can you give clear expectations on what questions you're going to ask? If the candidate needs to prepare anything in advance, can you give them time to do it? Can you tell them how long the interview will take and how long each section will be and who's on the panel? And, and sometimes as employers, I think we can feel like, oh, no, we've got to keep the element of surprise. We've got to kind of test someone. And you go, but when you're doing the job, you're going to give them time to talk, to think about it, to talk through their answers, to prepare for a meeting, to know who's in the meeting. Why are you creating this environment that is so completely unrealistic? And again, if you're doing certain things, can you make sure you make the candidates aware of that? So for example, if your interview has a computer-based exercise, a candidate may prefer to bring their own computer because they wish to use assistive technology. Or maybe you can preload assistive technology onto your, corporate machine you're doing that exercise on. If there's a case study that involves a large amount of reading that you're handing someone 20 minutes before the interview, for a dyslexic candidate, that's not going to be how they bring about their best strengths. Or even the environment of the interview, windows, glass rooms, noisy offices, flickering lights, buzzing, strong smells, background noise, all of these things. And I think, again, it's as employers, we seem to have this default that the interview is about surprising people and throwing them tough questions. And that's not the environment we create when we want people to actually work in. And again, I think it's a chance to rethink. This might be working for a certain type of person, but it's not working for everyone. And I just finally, I will finish as well that interviews, CVs have a massive socioeconomic bias. You go to a private school, you go to Oxford, you have had CV training, interview training, you've done all of these things. I used to work in higher education for a privileged university. We gave our students loads of support on to get ready on this. And we could literally take someone who, pulled pints in a pub on a Friday night, Jane, and get them to talk about leadership and communication and time management and develop. They could apply for the CEO of Microsoft confidently, having spent a weekend pulling pints, given all of the prep work we give them. So just remember, as employers, these are biases and they exclude certain people.
And again, I think, that this is when I talk about conscious inclusion, is take away the opportunity for that bias. So as you say, a CV of someone who went to private or public school, went to Oxbridge or Redbrick University, whose dad or mom has friends in the city, so they've done internships which are unpaid and most people can't afford to do. That candidate is going to look much better on paper than a candidate who's gone to an inner city comprehensive, went to a former polytechnic, got a 2-1, but actually struggled against all the odds and put so much more effort in. You're not comparing like with like. So instead of saying which university did you go to, say, we need you to have these strengths, demonstrate how you have those strengths. And, I think it's really important. Julia put a really good point in about if we do the alternatives to CVs and interviews that we're talking about, that's going to take more cost and time for the hirers. And I think it does initially, but it saves an awful lot of time in the long run, because you'll only get suitable applicants. You won't get everybody applying for the job just giving it a punt. You'll only get people who really can do that job, which makes that whole shortlisting much easier. But also the cost and time involved in not getting the right person for the job is almost immeasurable, because then you have to go through the whole coaching, training, capability route, disciplinary, getting rid of, re-recruiting, and then there's all that time without anybody performing that job properly. That actually doing it properly from the start, including all talent, making sure that all talent has the opportunity to shine, increases your chances of getting the best person for the job, which is what the recruitment process is really absolutely all about. And I think you're right, Aidan, that I can remember the days, I am ancient, where interviews were designed to catch people out. They were designed to ask awkward questions that you weren't waiting for. So things like, if you were a car, what kind of car would you be and why? Or, how many tennis balls would it take to fill a court of
what's your spirit animal, Jane, is it?
Exactly. All of that.
Look, I really appreciate the comment about cost and time, because this is important, that it does take some effort and it does take, but the things we're recommending here, revising your job descriptions to make them clearer, giving candidates more notice with interviews, being more inclusive on your website. These are not kind of multi-million pound root and branch costs. And as well, you don't have to change the entire process. You have to welcome adjustments. Not every candidate with a neurodifference wants an adjustment to the interview process or the application process, but they appreciate the opportunity to do so. And I think, as we've touched on, this doesn't just benefit people with neurodifferences. This actually benefits everyone, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're a small social enterprise at Evenbreak. You know, we're not Microsoft. We're a small social enterprise. We all work from home. We don't use CVs or interviews. We don't have endless resources, but our recruitment process doesn't use CVs or interviews. And I know, looking at our team, we've got the very best people we possibly could have, because we've looked at how can they do the job, not can they, you know, have they had privilege in the past, and can they talk, you know, blag at interviews. So for me, it saves money and time and means that you get the absolute best people. So what would you say to employers who are saying, oh, it all sounds like too much hassle, and, you know, why would we do all of that? Michael, what would you say?
Well, I thought we went through that the last 50 minutes. As in more talent, representation, better market, all of that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, is this the wrong moment to say, well, what kind of company are you? Are you in is your company a widget company? Do you just want to employ clones, not clowns, clones? Or do you, you know, you really want some strengths out there, you know, you know, how do teams work together? The teams work together because they complement each other, not because they're all the same. And, you know, what we had the saying a couple of years back, I think you were in there as well, Jane. Groupthink is, so the antidote to groupthink is diversity. You know, what we've seen, and there's more and more research coming out of this. Adam Grant just recently, his latest book on organizations where everybody thinks alike, where there isn't that culture of belonging, they are set up to fail eventually. These are organizations where they don't grow. There are more mistakes being made, and actually worse, more of those mistakes are hidden even. So you really want to have that different kind of culture. Is that more difficult? Well, you know what? Is it difficult to just be great to everybody?
Well,
probably is.
Yeah.
But it's so much worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a candidate who was sacked from his job because he told his manager that what he was being told to do wouldn't work. Now, if that manager had listened, they would have saved themselves millions of pounds, because they were going down in the wrong direction. What they did do was they sacked him for being rude. Whereas actually every organization needs that kind of person who will, you know, the emperor's new clothes. Actually, we're going down this direction. We're putting lots of resources in this. Do we know it's going to work? And I think, although you don't always want to be contradicted and challenged, if you're not contradicted and challenged, you can make so many mistakes. You can just invest so much money and time and resources into the wrong things. What you need are people who will challenge, who will, you know, rock the status quo, who will actually say, you know, have you thought about doing this differently? And that's where innovation comes from. And I wonder if now, after the pandemic, we're thinking a bit more differently, generally about equality, about diversity, about inclusion, about different ways of working. I mean, one of the things that we talk about at Evenbreak is disabled candidates, whatever that difference might be, being premium candidates, because actually we bring with us not just the same diversity of skills and talents and qualities that everybody has, but also we've brought with us that we've had to navigate around barriers that other people haven't had to. So resilience. We know how to do things differently. We know how to be determined. We know that if we come across a problem we can't solve in the typical way, that we have to find other ways of doing it. And actually the whole new world of work is about doing things differently. We're not all doing 9 to 5 in the office Monday to Friday now. We've realized that people who work from home aren't shirking. They're probably working harder than people who work in the office. We realize we don't need the 2-hour commute every day. And actually, people who are neurodiverse or different in any kind of ways are so used to finding different ways of doing things, finding solutions to problems, that I really think that employers who aren't embracing this new way of working, which so much embodies what diversity and inclusion is all about, are going to very quickly get left behind and wonder what's happened. They'll look around and wonder why everybody else is steaming ahead and they've stayed in the same place. I just think it's too much of an opportunity for any employer to lose out on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got this example in my mind, and I could be stealing some of the time here, but brings me back to this big utility company, well known, where I had signed up as being disabled for the first time ever, because I kind of felt like, well, it is the truth, so I might as well tick it. And then when my boiler packed up and I called in, they go through the checklist, who are you and where do you live, and then they say, well, looks like you're disabled. And I was thinking, like, I'm going to get a better service, right? Finally something back. And then they said, well, can you speak to the responsible homeowner? And this is where I had signed a contract. I am a responsible homeowner, I like to think. And they didn't want to talk to me anymore. Now my wife gave them full barrels when they eventually talked to her, as they earned. But this is where they didn't have that perspective. They didn't have that insight that there is a market out there of 20% of people. We're winning. We work, we live, we consume utilities. Do consider us. Why are we continuously being excluded? And that is what you get when you don't have undiverse recruitment processes. You just get what you have.
Absolutely. And then when you have that workforce that isn't reflective of the population that you're serving, that's when they make these ridiculous mistakes and assumptions. Because they don't have anybody around them to tell them differently. And actually, that's how we learn, isn't it? With the people that we work with, that we associate with every day. That's, I learn as much from my colleagues and our candidates every day than I ever do from reading a book, because it's real life and it's telling us about, well, this is what happens. So yeah, I mean, I think, we're all violently agreeing, aren't we? Just as a final kind of round, I just wondered, and if there's any other questions or comments that anybody wants to make, please do make them now. We're aiming to finish at 3. But if there are neurodiverse people, people with what did you call them? Neuro unique, I think was the word.
Yeah. I like that.
What advice would you give? Because I know that a lot of candidates we talk to will try and mask, they'll not tell employers about their condition because they're worried it's going to go against them. What kind of advice would you give people who are looking for work, who are neurodiverse? Aidan, you must do this a lot in your role with the people that you support. What kind of advice would you give to candidates
who are looking for work? Is it?
Yeah.
I think, if you're looking for work, there's lots of great services and supports available. Obviously, Jane, there's platforms like Evenbreak that, specialize in kind of connecting with those relationships. God, sorry, that is a big question to ask on a 30-second timeline.
Yes,
I think what I would say to candidates is, there is help and support out there. And I think I would say that I think that is a good closing message. The same, that question about, well, this is going to take a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. And it's like, it doesn't have to. And I think what's great about Evenbreak, Jane, is you help employers on this journey of recruitment. You help break down the journey, which doesn't have to be costly and expensive. I know, Michael, if people go onto the accessibility, technology and tools page in Microsoft, there are so many things out there that people may not be aware that you can get, that you can integrate free of charge within your Microsoft Office product, within your broader Microsoft products. And I think the same, look, whether you're an employer or whether you're an individual, we can help with Lexxic, whether that's your employer journey, whether that's your individual journey. So I think it's don't feel alone in this. There are services and supports and companies and people out there that can help you with this journey. And I think I will shout about myself for a minute. What's great about Lexxic, what's great about Evenbreak is like, we've been doing this journey for a long time. You are not our first rodeo, as they say, as an employer. Whatever challenge you're facing in recruitment, we've probably seen it before, and we can help make what can feel like a complex process be a lot easier.
Do you want to just pop your URL in the chat so that people can follow up with you later on if they want to?
Sure.
And Michael, what would you say to neurodiverse candidates?
So, apart from what has been said there, you know what? I'm going to say it in a couple of ways, meaning the same thing. Don't go about fixing yourself. Focus on your strengths. Just build on your strengths, which you do have. And that's where you get your job, you get your solutions and things like that. The world isn't flat. There is no, in biodiversity, again, nothing is equal. So you'll probably have that spiky profile. Just work on your strengths. I know somebody who aced the recruitment interview just saying, yeah, but I can do this really well, and this is how it will help all of that. And I think, and we can always find an average person.
Yeah. Who wants average? God,
we don't want that.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, it is about shouting loud and proud about the strengths that people bring that are different from other candidates. I bring what other candidates bring, but also I bring this with me, whatever it might be. And Lindsay says in the chat, any employer who's not willing to provide accommodations for neurodiverse candidates or employees is not an employer you want to work for. So actually, it's a test for them, isn't it? If you're not going to make accommodations for me, you don't deserve me.
Yeah,
basically. And you can get on with your average colleagues, but you're not going to change the world like the rest of us are. So
and I think, Jane, like improving neurodiversity in organizations, it's a challenge because it requires us all to think differently, but it's an extraordinary opportunity, and we've gone on this journey in other parts of DNA. What have we missed out in workforces by excluding women, by excluding non-white candidates, by excluding LGBT candidates? And yes, it does require some work to work with someone who's different to you. Some days I wish everyone in the world was just like me and thought like me, and what a wonderful job and company it would be. But I'm not so naive to feel that long term. So yes, it is some effort. I won't lie to employers. It is effort, but the opportunity and the benefits far outweigh the effort. And if you're struggling with the effort, there's so many great partners and websites and people you can talk to out there to help you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And we've come to the end now. So thank you to everyone on the call for all of your comments and your questions and for joining in. That's always great when that happens. And, you've been very welcome here. Thanks again to Michael and to Aidan for joining us today. And there will be other Evenbreak Explores coming up. So watch this space and we'll let you know. But thank you very, very much for being with us this afternoon and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.